Welcome to Beef Bytes. This is a series of educational videos from Cooperative Extension. My name is Whitney Carman. I'm the Agriculture Agent in Grayson County.
I'm Tate. I'm the Ag Agent in Hancock County today.
All right, this series of videos are going to essentially work with the producer and the consumer to understand that there is a safe and wholesome food supply and teach our consumers and our producers how we do that. And so this is going to be a series starting from pasture to plate and how we get through that process.
You bet. We hope this is kind of a unique experience for you to where we can see those on-farm practices and how they translate back into the grocery store, as well as hopefully build consumer confidence in our product as well.
That's right. And so we hope you'll stick with us and learn something in the process and be able to help choose your favorite cut of beef at the meat case and also learn about your local farmer. For our Beef Bytes, we're going to talk a little bit about ribeye area, EPDs, marbling, and how that starts from pasture to plate. And so, Evan, today we're going to talk about and kind of start with the pasture part of it and the actual beef production part. So how do we, when you talk about ribeye area, what are we talking about?
Okay. So before we even get started, for someone that doesn't raise cattle, let's just talk real quick about what an EPD is. This is something that you'll see in several of our Beef Byte clips coming forward. An EPD is actually an estimation that we use for several different traits in cattle. It stands for expected progeny difference. It gives us an idea as to what different bulls, calves, and how they would perform against compared to the others. And so when you see the term EPD, just know that it's an estimation. It's a number that we use to calculate. It's based on that animal's performance. How their relations performance, their calves, their daughters, all those, how they've all performed over time, and then it's calculated that way. So when you think of EPD, just think of a tool that helps us estimate the given outcomes of that bull's calf. Okay?
Which is important on the production side because as a consumer, we are looking for a certain type of product at the meat case, and these EPDs help us match that product at the market.
You bet. And so today we're going to talk about 3 EPDs. Okay, we're going to talk about ribeye area, denoted REA. We're going to talk about back fat, denoted BF, and IMF, intramuscular fat, which we all know is marbling. Okay, so just a couple of quick definitions for you. Ribeye area is the surface of the long isthmus dorsi. That's actually the big muscle that runs down the back of the animal. It's in the eye of the ribeye that we'll show you here in a minute. We were actually able through ultrasound to measure those on live animals and figure out what the square surface area of those are, and we do that between the 12th and the 13th rib of the calf. That is measured in square inches. Back fat. That's a subcutaneous layer of fat that resides kind of between the hide of the animal and the muscle. Sometimes we know it as waist fat. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute, but we measure that in tenths of an inch. And then intramuscular fat is the fat within the muscle that we often know as marbling, like we talked about, and we call that taste fat.
Yeah, fat equals flavor in that situation.
You bet. So this is a picture of a ribeye, okay? And this ribeye shows really well all 4 muscles that could be contained in that cut of meat, okay? We have the long isthmus dorsi. We have a large round muscle here. We have the spinalus dorsi, which is also called the fat cap, okay? We have a complexus. Sometimes we'll see a complexus in that cut of meat, sometimes we won't. The same goes for the ileostomus. And so the long isthmus dorsi and the spinalus dorsi will be the 2 that we see most often in a ribeye. This right here is the most tender of the 2 muscles, contains the most marbling of the 2 muscles, but the most prominent would be long isthmus dorsi.
And the reason for that is because since it is a muscle of, it's not a muscle of locomotion, so it is a muscle of support, therefore it's not used that often. Right. So that's why it stays really tender.
You bet. And so when we get through here, this is what we're looking at today. And so we'll show you how we measure those things. Okay, so here's a picture of a steer in the feed yard. He's almost finished. This is where his 12th and 13th rib are located. And so when that carcass is hung upside down, that is where we'll actually split that carcass on that rib, and then we'll measure his true square inches of ribeye at that location. Here's just an image of a gentleman ultrasounding a calf that's in the chute. So this gives us a good estimation of what that cow is before we actually harvest it. And so if we've got a bull or whatever, bull or female in the registered business that we're using for seed stock, we're able to get a better estimation using ultrasound.
And that allows for the changes in the EPDs, and that's where that comes into play. You can kind of find out a little bit before harvest what's going to happen and how that animal is reacting to its genetics and its environment.
Absolutely. And so maybe we're comparing bulls and seeing how they've reacted to the environment and trying to select which ones actually have more marbling or a bigger ribeye. This is a tool that allows us to do that without harvesting that animal. And so this is what we see in an ultrasound. This is an ultrasound of the 12th and the 13th rib. This is the ribeye. This layer right here, this would be our back fat and our hide. Okay, this would basically be the outside of the animal. Here is our rib bone, right here. And then this right here would be that long isthmus dorsi, that round muscle that we talked about. And then that fat cap muscle would be right here as well. And so the dark part of that, within those white lines, that is muscle. And then those white specks that we see throughout there, that is actually intramuscular fat or marbling. So through some computer programs, we can actually estimate what percent of that picture is marbling, and then how many square inches that ribeye is. So this is just a trace of the eye. And so that's that long isthmus dorsi muscle that we saw there, and the spinal cap dorsi as well. So, all right, so EPDs. Every bull that we use in our country that is registered comes with a set of EPDs. And like we talked about, we're going to talk about 3 of them today: marbling, back fat, and ribeye area. And those are denoted in those yellow boxes. And so we have 2 bulls here. Okay, both of these happen to be Simmental bulls. We have a marbling EPD of a plus 0.4 on that bull, a negative 0.04 on that bull. If we wanted to look at the ribeye area, we have a 1.1 and a 1.3. And so the question is, depending on that producer's goals, which bulls would be best, or how would their calves be different? And so we do a little bit of bull math, and this is something that we'll do often in this program. But bull math, so we had bull A has marbling EPD of plus 0.4. Bull B had a marbling EPD of negative 0.04. So the actual difference that we would expect in those bulls' calves given in the same environment would be a positive 0.44 for bull A. So bull A's calves should have a 0.44 higher marbling score, higher intramuscular fat than bull B. Okay? If we were to look at ribeye area, okay? Heavier muscle cattle have larger ribeyes. Okay? So bull B's ribeye area was 1.3. Bull A's ribeye area was 1.1. The difference is 0.2. So bull B's calves, on average in that environment, should have 0.2 more square inches of ribeye area than bull A's.
And so when you look at that, they're decimals and they look like small numbers, but really in the grand scheme of things, they're pretty significant when you look at it down the road and when you're looking at your EPDs. And especially when you've got 0.2 more square inches of ribeye area, that's cost for the producer. That's more money in that producer's pocket.
You bet. So we're really looking for heavy. When we're looking at ribeye area, we're really trying to judge how much muscle is in that animal. Okay, this is marketable product, and producers are paid on pounds. And so those cattle, we would assume that these calves weigh more at the end because they're heavier muscle. Okay. So just an EPD summary of what these are. Ribeye area, the higher number indicates a heavier muscle calf, just like we talked about. So more marketable product. Marbling, the higher number indicates more taste fat okay? And therefore it has a higher grading potential and probably more market value when we look at those in the meat case. And we'll talk about that here in a minute, I'm sure. And then back fat. The higher number indicates more back fat, and so inherently more waste fat. So in this particular case, we're actually looking for a smaller number on back fat. We want less waste in the packing plant. And so a lower number is more desirable for carcass quality in that particular case.
And you would think, it sounds a little confusing that you're gonna get a lower number on back fat versus marbling, but part of the selection process and through the years of selecting bulls that do this, that allows us to have that higher number, because the marbling obviously is the last fat that gets put on the animal. So you would think that it would be symbiotic, but it's not, it's actually inverse.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So our next slide, this kind of shows some genetic trends, okay? And this is the purpose of selection, and this is the power of selection, and one of the reasons that we do it on the farm, okay? If we were to look at marbling and back fat, those are the two that we're actually worried about today. Let me see. Where's your red box at? Oh, it's not on my computer. Okay, so marbling. This is in 2008. The average EPD for marbling was negative 0.05. In 2018, it is 0.05. Okay, that is 1/10 of a point better. Okay, back fat in 2008 was negative 1.23. Back fat in 2018 is a negative 1.0. So we're actually have cattle now that have more marbling, more taste fat, and less waste fat.
Right.
And that's over the course of 10 years.
Right, so as you can see, it does take a little bit of time when you're talking about making these changes in the EPDs, but it is worth noting that it is something that can happen relatively quickly, and it is for the consumer, because obviously, as we know, the consumer is wanting a more, they want a tasteful product, but they want a they want a more lean product, and so we are seeing this answered in our selection process.
You bet. So I think as we transition, I will figure out how it works out in the meat case.
Yeah, so we're going to check out an actual ribeye, and we're going to talk about that, and then kind of get into what to look for at the meat case.
So now that we've talked a little bit about genetics and selection and what goes into trying to produce a good ribeye, we thought we'd bring up what you see in the meat case. And so this is Whitney's expertise, and so we're certainly glad to have her here to talk through just a few things of what you can look for in the meat case, and then let you talk through some quality grade stuff too.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that you can look through at the meat case and look for. It's kind of overwhelming, really, if you're someone that's shopping at the grocery store and you think, oh Lord, what is this that I need to look for? The main thing that we want to look for is a bright red color meat. And so you want to see this. Now, I will say that there are some instances where you might see a little bit of brown in a type of meat, say ground beef, or if we open up this label here shortly, there might be a brown spot. That's all okay. That's all part of a process called oxidation, and that's not bad. The other thing that we want to look for is our sell-by date. So that's the other thing showing that it's fresh. Meat in these types of packages don't tend to last as long as those that are vacuum packaged, because we take all the air out of that. So there are varying degrees of packaging that we look for. But as far as the meat is concerned, we want to look for that marbling like we talked about. So here is, I'm gonna tear this open so that we can actually have a real look at it. Okay, so I actually went this morning, so this is a fresh cut, and pointed out that I needed something that was pretty good quality. And so there are 3 different types of quality grades that you're going to see in the grocery store. And the 3 main ones are prime, choice, and select. So prime obviously is the best. Prime that's the most marbling, okay? You're gonna pay more for it because fat equals flavor that we talked about earlier. And that marbling is gonna show up, like you said, in that longissimus dorsi and in that fat cap. All right, then you've got intermuscular fat that's gonna go through here. That is fat that's going to give it flavor, but you're probably most likely gonna cut that out when you're actually eating the steak. But this is okay to have in there. That's part of it. This muscling here this marbling, that is considered a choice product. Okay, so if it had a little more marbling in it, a little more white flecks of fat in there, that will make it a prime. All right, so it would be it would have an abundant amount of fat in it, and so that would mean that it's fat, that it is prime. Now, if you're looking for more of a lean product, okay, and in this case, the ribeye is not technically a lean product. It's there are 29 lean cuts of beef, and the ribeye is just outside that. But this would be a select product. So prime is the best. Choice is what we find. This is choice. And then select is going to have a little less marbling. There are actually 7 different quality grades, but the ones that you get down past select, those are standard, utility, cutter, canner. Those are all ones that are going to be ground up into pre-cooked products, ready-to-eat products, and then the lower ones are going to be things in like dog food and other products that we would maybe feed to our animals. So with that being said, the 3 things that you're going to see the most are prime, choice, select in the grocery store.
Cool. And so talk to us real quick about price difference between prime, choice, and select.
Yes, so as you can see here, we purchased this ribeye steak for $12.31, and it's about, if you can look on here, the weight is almost a pound. So the price is $13.99 a pound, and you would think, wow, that's really expensive, but you're paying for a good quality product. And so prime, you're going to be paying more like $20 a pound for your prime. And you're not always going to see prime at the grocery store, because choice and select are the most common that we're going to find. Prime is more for your restaurants, your higher end restaurants, things that you're going to go get an eating experience and you know you're going to pay for it when you go.
So, just real quick on tenderness. Can somebody look at that steak and determine tenderness?
Well, tenderness is actually an interesting situation. We usually think that taste is equal to tenderness, and really the difference in tenderness is the type of muscle that it is, okay? So the muscle in here that you've got is muscles of support versus muscles of locomotion. So muscles of locomotion are the ones that from our chuck and our round of our beef. And so they're going to be a little less tender because they're used more often. These muscles of support, like our ribeye, our filet mignon, those are all going to be tender. Now, the fat is going to make it seem like it's more tender, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So what you're getting with an intramuscular fat or a marbling is the actual flavor. So the more that it's got in there, the more flavorful it's going to be. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be tender.
Gotcha. So if I were to buy this steak today in this type of packaging, and I took it home, how long do I have before I can cook it? To cook it.
Okay, so we usually tell you to follow the sell-by date. Okay, I also will say if it's not green or stinky or anything like that, you want to make sure to use it by the sell-by date. But you could probably go a day or two after, just look at it and make sure. But what I would also say is that you can use it or freeze it. So if you know you're not going to use it by the sell-by date, just stick it in the freezer. And there's ways that you can do that as well. We can talk about that on a whole different day. So, but it is, as far as food safety is concerned, we just practice by sell-by date. My favorite place to shop is the Manager Special.
Okay.
So, and that's because you're going to buy meat that is really close to its sell-by date, and or it may be a little bit different color, which once again, it's that oxidation process. The one thing we don't want is green and moldy. Okay, so if you see a package like that, or a package that's got a lot of juice in the bottom of it, or what we call myoglobin, it's not blood, it's myoglobin. That is another indication that it's maybe been through a temperature change, and you kind of want to steer it clear of those as well.
Gotcha. So while we're talking about this, let's talk a little bit about cooking and cooking temperatures.
Yeah, so we have typically what you want to look for in a steak. There are a couple of different cooking temperatures. Steaks and roast are going to be, they're going to be cooked. The way we like to cook them for the best eating experiences is medium rare. And so that's 145 degrees. And the way we're going to do that is with the thermometer. And we can demonstrate that for you as well. And so you're going to stick that into the side of the meat cut. And that's going to be medium rare. So it's going to be pink on the inside, which is safe to eat because inside that steak is sterile. Now, for our ground beef, that's a different story. Our ground beef is going to be 160 degrees, and that's medium doneness, and that's brown all the way through. As you can see here, we have rare, which is 120 degrees. Medium rare is 130, it's actually 145. Medium is 160. Medium well is 165, and well done is 170. And you can see the differences in that. All of those are safe to eat, okay? That's the main thing to understand in a steak. But our ground beef products, we want to make sure that we're at that 160 degrees. And that means just brown all the way through, like I said. And that's, that's an interesting part, because a lot of people, we have a really good product that we as producers create. And so, cooking it to a well doneness is going to actually make it less tender, because you're taking all those juices out of it. So you don't want to overcook your steak, especially if you're paying $13 a pound for it.
So, and I see someone eating a rare steak in a restaurant. Should I have any concern for their health or well-being?
Not necessarily, because, I've always been told that there's, some people like their steaks to a point where a good vet can't save them. And, so that's one of those things that it's up to personal preference. But we in the industry as a whole, the Beef Checkoff will tell you, and producers will tell you that 145 degrees is the safe, and that's medium rare. And so that is brown on all sides and a pink center, a cool pink center, and that will suffice for a great, tasty eating experience.
Awesome. Okay, so one other question I have, when I'm in the meat case and I'm looking for a steak, how thick should they be cut, and or what are my concerns there with thickness?
Okay, so there are several different topics, and it's kind of based on personal preference on how thick you want it. But obviously, the thinner the steak, the quicker it's going to cook. So that also depends on your time. You have time to hang out, or you're having a barbecue, and you're having family and friends over, and you got time to do it. But these are an inch thick, and that's typically what you're going to find at the grocery store. You can have them cut up to 2 inches. But the difference between a steak and a roast is that 2-inch mark. So once you get past 2 inches, you're going to be into the roast. Okay. Now 2 inches is fine. I mean, sometimes we can cut those real thick, and what I would recommend doing at that point is grilling it and then finishing up in the oven, so that way it doesn't overcook on the grill or burn on the grill. But then you can also have things called breakfast steaks, where they're really thin, and you can throw them in a fryer or throw them in a skillet, and they'll cook fairly quickly. But that is pretty well the difference. Is just the width.
So the thickness, that would determine what method I use to cook it.
Yes,
correct?
absolutely. So obviously at 2 inches or more, you're going to want to start into the roasting process. So you're going to want to put it in the oven, put it in a crock pot. Obviously, when we talk about roast, a lot of times people are going to put it in the oven or the crock pot, and you're going to cook it for low and slow. Our thinner cuts, your ribeyes, your steaks, your sirloins, your fillets, flat irons even, which is a really new popular cut. Those are all grillable steaks, and you can do high heat for a short amount of time.
Awesome. So one other question. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at a menu, and I see ribeyes and I see prime rib.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
Okay, the prime rib is just a cut of meat. Okay, so it's a little bit of play on words, and you're thinking, why would you confuse me anymore? We've already got over 40 different cuts of meat. Why would you confuse me a little more? But the ribeye steak is, once again, one of those. It's one of those muscles of locomotion, and the prime rib is just another cut out of the beef. And so it's not that it's prime, actual quality, but it's just the type of cut it is.
All right, so we're out here by the grill. We're going to prepare a couple of ribeyes for you. First of all, how long can we leave our ribeyes out of the refrigerator before they go to the grill?
I don't like to leave anything out more than 2 hours as a food safety rule. So anything that you're cooking, you don't want to leave anything out more than 2 hours. And so there is some schools of thought that you want to let your meat rest, but typically if you stick it right out of the refrigerator onto the grill, it's going to be just fine.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about off of the video about marinades, and so sometimes you might want to marinate. This ribeyes, you don't really have to marinate because they're already tender enough. And the only way you would want to do that is if you're wanting to add flavor, and so you're going to want anything that's not necessarily acidic you can put on there. The ones you do want to marinate for maybe 6 hours to 24 hours are your cuts from your round, your muscles of locomotion, those ones that are a little less tender, and then you're going to want to use some sort of acidic ingredient to kind of break down the muscle fiber in that meat to make it more tender.
So we've got choice steaks.
Yep.
Should have plenty enough flavor when we cook those if we do it correctly.
Yes, and these are what I call naked. They don't have anything on them.
Okay.
Salt, pepper, that's the way I like mine.
So we're fixing to go to the grill. Talk a little bit about what you've got ready.
All right. We've got, anytime that I'm grilling, whether it's, for a barbecue or at home in the evening for my family, you want to make sure you have a clean cutting board. We use a thermometer, meat thermometer. There are varying degrees of thermometers. The one thing that I will tell you is you make sure that it's calibrated, because these little guys, especially the ones that you can get that are pretty cheap from different places, they have a place that you can actually, you want to do more ice than water. You stick it down there, you want it to get to 32 degrees, and then you will maneuver that dial up here and make sure that it's calibrated to 32.
Okay.
So that's how you would calibrate it. Then, so we'll have that set aside, because once we get done grilling, we'll check our temperature and make sure that it's done. Knife for cutting, obviously we're gonna want to make sure that we use a sharp knife for cutting our steaks.
Okay, and so you've got your grill started.
Yep.
So how do I know, because this grill doesn't have a thermometer on it.
Right.
So how do I know that we're close to the right temperature?
We typically do 375, 400 for our grilling cuts. Unless you're wanting to kind of do a low and slow method, then we're going to do 350 or less. Smoking is 250 range.
Okay.
However, for this, hot heat, one really kind of neat way that we do, since I don't have a thermometer on here, I'm going to, and I've got gloves on, so I'm not going to do it, but you would open it up, and if you can hold your hand over it for less than 4 seconds, then it should be good to go.
Okay.
Same for charcoal, because charcoal a lot of times doesn't have a thermometer on its grill either, but that's a good indicator. Or medium to medium high heat if it's a propane grill.
Okay, awesome.
All right, so let's go ahead. I've got this ready to go. It's heated up. Once again, it's propane, and we got a little bit of wind, so obviously make sure you get that under control. I'm gonna stick these on here. That's a good sound. It is and we're filming this in May. It's beef month, so hey, let's stick some beef on the grill. And then I'm gonna shut it, and that's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna wait it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how long would I expect those before I would need to turn or check those?
So you can check on it periodically. I say the more times that you open that grill, that it changes the temperature, so it's longer to cook. But when you start to see juices rise to the top of that steak, that's time to turn it. Okay, and then you're going to flip it over, and then I say flip it twice, or flip it once, and then flip it back over, so twice total.
So the juice that comes out of steaks,
yeah,
is that blood?
No, it's not.
No, it's not.
It's myoglobin, and it's basically a protein in the blood, much like iron. If we have iron in our blood, it's iron, and that's what gives it its red color. So red meat, our beef, our pork have more myoglobin than our chicken. That's why chicken is what we call white meat. So that's what that is. It's okay. It's not blood.
Okay, so we're starting to see a little bit of moisture come up. So that's the myoglobin that you talked about.
Yep.
All right, so what do we need to be doing now?
We need to turn them. Make sure you prime your grill too. Even though I primed this, you still might have a little bit of stickage, and that's okay, but you can stick olive oil on there before you go. But as you can see, those got some nice grill marks, and they're cooked on that side. We're gonna close it back and wait for the other side to cook. All right, so you can see here, this is our fat, and it's gonna flare up a little bit, so you wanna make sure, that you keep your heat a little bit lower there. But see, these juices are running clear, so it's time for us to check our thermometer. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna take it off the heat, and I'm gonna stick it into the thickest part of that steak, all right? And your thermometer is going to have varying degrees. Some thermometers are going to have a point on the tip, and some of them are going to have a point on the side. So you want to make sure that you get that. So we're getting close there. All right, so we've checked our thermometer, and it's at 145 degrees. We're going to set these on here, and here's a really important key in cooking meat of any kind. you want to let it rest a minute. And
By rest, what do you mean?
let it sit and let those juices kind of go back to the center, or let them disperse back out into the meat cut. Because what's happening when that heat is high, think about it in terms of if you get hot, everything gets balled up into the center, and so all of those juices are going to the center of that cut of meat. And so by letting them relax, once they start to cool off, they start to separate back out and disperse back out. And so therefore you don't want to cut into that steak until it's rested for about 2 to 3 5 minutes at the longest, and let those juices go back out, and then you can make your cuts into your steak.
So will it be cool by then?
Yeah, it'll be great. In fact, it'll be perfect to do that, to cut into it and have a good eating experience. And you can always, another thing too is if you want to take it off at say 140 degrees at the grill, it will continue to cook for a couple of minutes too after you pull it off of the grill, because that heat's still in there. And so you can always let that go off of the grill a couple of degrees before, and it'd still be at 145 degrees. Just make sure you test it again.
So we're fixing to cut into our steaks here real quick. Just real quick, now that we've got them cooked and we can see them really well, kind of go through those muscles again, show us where the tender parts of that steak is going to be, and then the seam fat and waist fat.
Okay, so there's not a lot of waist fat on here. There is a little bit of this intermuscular fat. That's not the marbling, that's the intra. But this is our cap that we talked about, and this once again is going to be the best eating experience here because it's more tender than this rib eye or the longissimus dorsi here. Still great cuts, still very tender, but this one is going to be more tender than this because it's used less than that. So this is your external fat here. Your intramuscular fat is actually those juices, and so that's what's been cooked in, and so you're not going to see that. That's that clear stuff that you see in the cooked portion of the meat. So another tip, when we go to actually cutting the steak, you want to cut it against the grain. Cutting against the grain helps with the tenderness as well. So any kind of less tender cut that you've got, you want to make sure that you cut across the grain, and typically you're going to see the grain running one way or the other.
So can you show us here?
Yeah, so you can see the grain, all right, is running sort of, it's a little, it kind of varies in this situation, but see, you've got grain that's running this way, so you're going to want to cut this way, okay? All right, let's do it here. Sharp knife. We let this sit, so it cooked a little bit more while it was sitting here, so, and that's okay. Depends on your personal preference what you want to cook, but you can kind of see that pink center. And see that thin pink center? We're probably more to the medium than we are the medium rare. Another cool thing here is that will turn red the more that it sits open, because there's oxygen being exposed to that, so it's going to turn it into that bright red color. All right, so you can see here in the same cut of meat, there is some varying degrees of doneness. And so you have this will be considered your medium rare, this will be your medium, and then getting more into your well done. And I think that goes to show that even if we try our best to get a perfectly done steak the way we like it, depending on the temperatures and how long we let it rest, it can still continue to cook. So this is just a good indication of how there are several different cuts or several different donenesses in this one steak.
So thank you so much for being a part of Beef Bites. We hope to continue this. As far as cooking goes, is there some other resources that we can turn people to?
Yeah, so the Cooperative Extension Service has a varying degree of resources, and we also utilize some industry partners. The Kentucky Beef Checkoff is a really great resource. They are tied directly into the Beef is What's for Dinner and their promotional efforts, and they do all sorts of research, education, and any kind of cooking recipes that you want. They've got information on that, and theirs is at beefiswhatsfordinner.com and at kybeef.com. So those are great resources for us to use, and we in Extension use them all the time.
Absolutely. So if you're a producer or a consumer and you've seen something in this video you'd like to ask a question about, how do they need to get a hold of us?
So they can contact either one of us. He works in Hancock County, I work in Grayson County, and you can contact us at our office, or if you can reach out to our Facebook page, you can email us and ask us questions, because we want to hear from you and hear your questions and get those answers for you.
So we'll include all of our email and contact info on the last part of this. So feel free to use that at any time.
Thank you.
Yep. Come back and see us next time.